Welcome on into the No Huddle Show. Matt Lombardo, Elliott Short-Marks, live from the NovaCare Complex as training camp officially is now in the books. And before we get to what's going to be an exciting edition of the podcast, just want to remind everybody that if you're listening to us in a browser, if you're scrolling around and you just stumbled on this podcast on YouTube, do us a favor. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We're on Spreaker. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Google Play. We're on Stitcher. Anywhere and everywhere where you can find a podcast, there's a good chance the No Huddle Show is there. And Elliot, as always, hopefully we can get a couple more 5-star reviews out of this podcast today.
Man,
what do you think?
Hopefully I can get that radio voice one day. Look at that. It's like back on the radio. I thought I was good at those intros. Well, you got to give us those 5-star reviews. If you're listening on YouTube, toss us those thumbs up, especially for today. Because, I know we just gave you one yesterday. We said we weren't going to have one until next Monday, but
Surprise, we're here.
Yeah, surprise, we're here. So, Matt, go ahead, take it. I mean, you're the one that got this. So.
Yeah, we're going to check in with Lane Johnson in a little bit, talking about his thoughts on the upcoming season, what he's thought about Carson Wentz's improvement, and really just about this offensive line, which I feel like, Elliot, that's an area of this team that we really haven't spent much time talking about on the podcast, but it could really well wind up being, outside of maybe the quarterback situation, depending on Wentz, it could wind up being the strength of this team.
Yeah, and, Lane, we've recorded probably 10 or 15 podcasts since the season started. I don't think we've talked much about Lane, which is ironic because Wentz is probably the most important player, but if you're just talking about the combination of importance and skill, he's probably the best player / most important player on this team. We all saw last year. I mean, it's hard to really quantify how much an offensive lineman helps your team. I mean, there's not a ton of offensive line stats, but with Lane, there's the stat of 5-1 with them on the field last year.
Yep.
And then 2-9 with them, something like that. They're not. I can't do the math off the top of my head. 5-1 with them though, so that's how you know he's an important guy, and also a guy that we were saying on the sideline yesterday. He's only been in the league 4 years, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy when you think about his ascent in terms of becoming a leader on this team. Mm-hmm. And outside of Jason Peters, outside of Carson Wentz, you look at that offensive side of the ball, and it comes down to him and Jason Kelce really as the two leaders on the team. And not that I didn't already know the value that Lane Johnson has, and as you said, I think you put it best, maybe the most important player on this team outside of the quarterback. But just during practice today, there was a play where they ran, I believe it was Darren Sproles off tackle. And number one, you were struck by the explosiveness of Sproles still turning the corner. But number two, just how quickly Lane gets out there as a lead blocker on the edge. And there were a handful of plays last year where that was the case. The screen pass to Sproles against the Steelers for that big touchdown pass comes to mind when you think about that. But just Lane's versatility playing left, playing right at a very high level. And Derek Barnett told me earlier in camp that going up against Lane and going up against Jason Peters every day has done wonders for him in terms of just his development and picking up on maybe refining his pass rushing technique in practice.
Yeah, and the last point I want to make before we get into this is, when you talk about we've talked to death about, the offseason additions. We've debated the loss of Jordan Matthews, the addition of Ronald Darby, how good Alshon's going to be. The biggest addition this team might be getting this year is Lane. I mean, I know he only played in 5 or 6 games last year, so he did play. But if you have Lane for 60, if you told me before I made a prediction for the season that you're going to have Lane Johnson for 16 games, that is going to make me increase my win value more than Alshon, more than Ronald Darby, because he really is the most important piece on that offensive line. If you lose him, then you got to put Vaitai in there. He's injured right now. Maybe if you lose Jason Peters, you move Lane to the left. So,
yeah, and Elliot, I agree, and that's a luxury that the Eagles have that not many teams across the NFL have, which is not only 2 guys that can play left tackle, but 2 guys in Jason Peters, who is likely to go on to be a Hall of Famer, and Lane Johnson, who has played at an all-pro level the last couple of years. 2 guys that can play left tackle at a very high level. Derek Barnett's talked about how much that's helped him. The impact that has on the offense based on the Eagles' success with Lane and their failure without him last year. And, unfortunately, we couldn't get Lane in studio for all 3 of us, and we had a little bit of technical difficulties recording it. But Lane was great as he always is. Here's my sit-down with Lane Johnson from Tuesday. All right, we're here with Eagles right tackle Lane Johnson on the final day of Eagles training camp. Lane, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, no problem.
So how's this summer been for you? Obviously, a lot different than last year. You don't have the dark cloud of an impending suspension hovering over you, some higher expectations with Alshon Jeffrey coming in. What's this summer and this training camp been like for you personally?
It's been good. Trained alone at home, trained by myself, so just did a lot of stuff alone and hung out with the family and, just stayed in Oklahoma really. When I got back up here, just been grinding, staying to myself and trying to work on my craft.
And obviously, you look at this offensive line. It's another year with Jason Peters here. It's another year basically across the board. You guys return the same 5 starters. Isaac Seumalo steps up. What's it been like for you with this offensive line going into its second year together?
That's been good. The main thing with offensive line play is just having consistency, having all the guys there, and just getting the repetitions and muscle memory. And the more repetitions you usually get, the better you're going to play together.
And obviously, you look at Jason Peters re-sign this offseason, and that kind of puts on hold you making that switch from right tackle to left. Do you enjoy the fact that you get to kind of cement yourself as one of the better right tackles, or are you itching to make that move?
I mean, I know my permanent home's at left, but, while I'm at right, I'm going to try to be the best there while I can. But, yeah, I mean, it's, I'm lucky I got a Hall of Famer over there to learn from, and, he's been a great teammate, so however many more years it is I'll be fine at right.
What's that like for you, having a guy like Jason Peters in the offensive line room with you to kind of pick his brain?
Yeah, it's just, you go back and watch some of the film, you just see how, stuff is supposed to be done and, how the technique's supposed to be used, so you have kind of the mirror image of what you're trying to be like, and it's the example's right there for you every day.
And you look at this offense in general, Carson's second year. I talked to John DeFilippo a couple weeks ago, and he said that one of the things that he's noticed is his throwing motion, the ball's up a lot higher, which means he's been more accurate. But it seems like there's been some days where he's just been completely dialed in. You're in the offensive meetings with him every day. You're on the field with him every day in practice. What's that kind of been like for you? What's been the biggest difference from Carson this year to where he was as a rookie?
I think he just had a lot more time to reflect and learn, just to watch some of the game tape and, some of the mistakes he may have made. He's had time in the offseason to fix it and prepare as a starter instead of going in, 7-8 days, from week one becoming a starter. So he just had a whole lot more time to learn and improve, and it's showing.
Everybody that I talk to, whether it's assistant coaches or other players, they talk about him really embracing that role as a leader and the franchise quarterback. Have you seen anything in terms of his command of the room and command of the teammates, walking into this year?
Yeah, it's just more of a presence with him. Not that he's arrogant or cocky, but you do feel that confidence with him. And, he knows he's a franchise guy, so, he walks around like it, and people, people like that. They want a leader and a quarterback, and that's what he is.
What's the feeling around the offense right now? Obviously, Alshon, Torrey Smith, you bring in Legarrette Blount. It's almost like the front office was sending a message, hey, we have a young franchise quarterback, we have a solid offensive line, but hey, let's go get some veterans. It seems like they kind of put the foot on the gas pedal a little bit this offseason.
Yes, I think we got all the players in the building to be successful. Main thing with preseason is just fine tuning, getting some plays on your belt, getting used to it. So come week one, you hit the ground running.
And last week, preseason opener against the Packers. What was that like for you to finally get out of a training camp setting, get on the field, and just hit somebody else in a different uniform?
Yeah, that's good. Just to see, live action with somebody else. You get to see different blitzes you haven't seen. Not like you really prepare like it's a game week, but it, you do go into another stadium, so it feels just like a game.
It seemed like they brought the heat. It seemed like Dom Capers dialed up a little bit more of, a blitz-heavy package than most people do during a preseason game. Did that take you guys by surprise at all?
We knew they were going to blitz. We didn't know it was going to be, 99% of the time, because usually, preseason package is really pretty plain and blunt. So, it kind of surprised us a little bit.
Speaking of blunt, you bring in Legarrette Blount in the offseason, and last year it seemed like the one thing that might have been missing was that short yardage back. Somebody on 3rd and 1 that could move the chains, somebody down around the goal line. What's your first impression so far of Legarrette?
Oh, I actually trained with him coming out of college there for combine training. So I saw him. He's just a big guy. When you're around him, he's 240. 250 range, so just a big guy who can get that extra yards when you need it. But we have a change of pace back in Sproles and Smallwood. Smallwood really, has impressed me in camp too. So and Pumphrey is coming along too. So we got to stable back there.
So let's take a step back real quick to the beginning of training camp. And the first day of practice, you come in with the outrageous blonde wig. Then the next day, it's the red, white, and blue bandana. And everybody every day, it's Lane Johnson watch. What is Lane Johnson wearing on his head today? Seems like your teammates kind of got a kick out of that.
Yeah, well, just going into practice, I feel like a lot of guys get kind of jitters, kind of get anxious, and so I kind of wanted to lighten up the mood a little bit, something funny. Not to draw too much attention to myself, just kind of lighten the mood. That's why I did it for a few days and not really carried it on. But, just something to get a few laughs every now and then.
And then after the first practice over at the link, you said if you guys win the Super Bowl this year, it's free beer for everybody. Yeah. Have you figured out how much that might cost to be free beer for the entire city?
There's going to have to be Twitter polls and all sorts of stuff, see what people like and what they don't like. So, that's far-fetched, but, we got to focus on week one and just winning the division, getting the playoffs for any of that talk can be done.
I saw Bud Light reach out to you on Twitter like 2 days later and said, hey, you guys get the job done. Yeah. We'll foot the bill. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll see how many people like Bud Light if that's the case. But, it's pretty interesting. It was funny.
Now, speaking of the upcoming season, you got the Dallas Cowboys, won the division a year ago. Zeke Elliott gets suspended. Mm-hmm. Giants look like they loaded up. Mm-hmm. The Redskins week one. No truer test in the division to get that out of the way at FedEx Field week one. In terms of division play, is there somebody at defensive end within the NFC East that you really circle on the calendar every year that you want to line up against?
Not really circle. I like going against Ryan Kerrigan. I feel like it's just a good battle, kind of like the Runyon Strahan, just a good guy. A good guy who tries hard every play. He's pretty talented and just a high-effort guy, and I look forward to playing him every year.
Now, looking at this year, I mean, you obviously said free beer on you if you guys win it all. What's the vibe in the room? Have the expectations really kicked up a notch going into the year from maybe the last couple seasons?
I think outside looking in, the expectations have kicked up, but inside we just try to keep it plain Jane. Just focus on our assignment, because the more you focus on stuff you can't control, the greater it gets you away from what you're trying to accomplish. So that's been our key focus.
For you personally, what are some goals going into the year?
Just to be on the field every game. I don't want to be injured. No suspensions looming over my head. I just want to be able to be Lane Johnson to his fullest potential. And I think when I can do that, I can be an elite tackle year in, year out. So that's the key for me. Just getting a full season. The Pro Bowl happens. It happens, but I see that more as a popularity contest nowadays than what it used to be. But it would still be a high honor.
It seems like you've raised your profile over the last couple of years, with players across the league because of your high play. I think Pro Bowl seems like it might be within reach for you this year.
Yeah, we'll see. But I think it all starts with winning games, and maybe winning the division, going to the playoffs. It definitely increases your chances.
Definitely, Lane. Appreciate the time. Yeah. Look forward to catching up again further up the road.
All right, appreciate you.
Yeah, that was Lane Johnson, and two things that really jumped out at me there, Elliot, is, he aims to make his first Pro Bowl this year, and he looks at Ryan Kerrigan as kind of his Michael Strahan from those classic Eagles-Giants battles, Runyon against Strahan from back in the day. He's not going to have to wait long to get a chance at Kerrigan week one at FedEx Field.
Yeah, and to me, first of all, it's crazy to me he's never made a Pro Bowl if you think about it. Not that he's consistently played at a Pro Bowl level, because I don't think he has. But when you just talk about Lane, as we said before the interview, he probably is his team's best and most important player. So the fact that their best and most important player, you can argue it's Fletcher Cox. I would argue it's Lane Johnson.
Yep.
But the fact that Lane hasn't, it's surprising to me. You would think he has played at a Pro Bowl level. But again, the issue is when in 4 years in the league, 4 or 5 years, you've been suspended twice for PEDs, and last year was 10 of them, that's obviously going to take an impact.
Sure, and I think that when he's been on the field, he's played at that Pro Bowl level. It's just a matter of getting him on the field for 16 games. And I think that last year really taught him a lesson, and the fact that he didn't go and work out at Jay Glazer's workout camps this offseason. He didn't go and take supplements, throughout the course of the offseason. He went back home, trained in Oklahoma, trained at the NovaCare complex. I think it really taught him a lesson last year, and I think that the Eagles are going to benefit from that work, and they're also going to benefit, as I touched on with him a little bit, Elliot, from the fact that outside of promoting Isaac Seumalo to being a starter by trading away Alan Barber at the start of camp, you're basically returning 5 offensive line starters, and aren't that many teams in the league that can say that going into this season.
Yeah, and the thing about Lane twofold is, one, I'll say, even though he did get suspended last year, and that's something I've held against Alshon as we talk about, and so I certainly think it's something you can hold against Lane. I'm just starting to deal with Alshon, so I can't speak to how he handled it last year in Chicago.
Right.
But I will say that Lane has always been, when players get suspended, they release statements, and those things always don't come across as completely genuine, just because a lot of times they're not even the ones that write it or how people help them write it. But the times where Lane has talked about it, either just at his locker in a media scrum, I do think he has come across as extremely genuine in his regret of what happened. Now, I'm not saying he's admitted to purposely taking it, but you can tell that he really does feel genuinely bad about the spot he put this team in last year. Now, that aside, the question I'll ask you is is Lane a player that you think the Eagles can count as a foundation, considering the fact that he is one failed test away from a 2-year suspension?
Yeah, I think they have to hedge their bets a little bit, and I think they've done that by drafting Vaitai last year. They didn't really address the offensive line at all in this year's draft or in the offseason, other than bringing in Chance Warmack for some interior line depth, which they traded away Alan Barber, and now you're left with Chance. But I think that in terms of the type of player that he is, I think you can absolutely count on Lane Johnson to be one of your foundational centerpieces, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Eagles hedge their bets, maybe draft an offensive lineman or an offensive tackle sometime in the first 3 or 4 rounds of this upcoming draft in 2018. But I think that you put him as your left tackle of the future and you have Vaitai as your right tackle of the future. That's a nice start for an offensive line to build for years to come.
Yeah, I think Vaitai is, I think you used the perfect word, nice. I think Vaitai is a nice right tackle. I don't think he's a guy that if you tell me he's going to be my right tackle for the next 8 years, I'm not feeling super confident about that. The Eagles' offensive line right now, I think because of Vaitai, I think he would be fine for 6 or 7 games if, Lane were to go down or Peters were to go down. But this line
he
now,
got better as the year went along last
year,
and I think they kind of threw him to the wolves without giving him much help
on the
outside.
Speaking of Kerrigan, I mean,
right?
Yeah.
He
that's a guy Lane struggles with.
He ate his lunch last year in Lane's first game that he was suspended. But you look at Vaitai, his arc last season, he seemed to get better and better and better. And it's a shame that he got hurt against the Packers, and it's probably going to keep him out of the game Thursday night against the Bills.
Right.
But he's a guy that they're going to count on for depth at both tackle positions.
Well, and that's the thing. You touched on it in one of your answers earlier. I mean, they do need to draft an offensive tackle for a couple reasons. One, because, like I said, although I like Vaitai, I don't think you can look at him as your heir apparent, either Peters or Lane. Lane, I agree with you. He has the ability to play left. He hasn't done it on a consistent level, and I think he would also admit that. And he himself has said, Jason Peters is one of the best left tackles of all time. So Lane knows once he gets on that left side, he's going to have a lot to prove, just like he did when he started at right tackle. But the other reason I think you need to draft someone soon is because the key in the NFL, I mean, this sounds almost redundant, but obviously is blocking the quarterback. So the offensive line is extremely important. The Eagles can kind of survive one injury to their tackles based off the fact that we both like Vaitai a little bit. They can't survive 2. I mean, if
not many teams can.
Not many teams can, but the difference is not many teams have one tackle that's 35 and entering, his 13th or 14th season, and the other tackle has been suspended twice for PD. So the Eagles are a little more susceptible to losing those tackles, which is why I think drafting a tackle early on next year is a good idea for 2 reasons. One, it gives you depth, but 2, it does give you that guy for the future. But, outside of just the future, again, like I said before the interview started, the fact that they're going to have Lane back this year, I really do think it changes the outlook of the season as opposed to all the other moves they made on the offense.
No doubt. And the fact that he is, assuming he stays healthy, going to be on the field for 16 games, it's a trickle-down effect because they're going to be able to run the ball more effectively on that side. You clearly saw the difference. Just look at Carson Wentz's footwork. Pop on NFL Game Pass and look at some All-22 tape of Carson Wentz last year in the first 3 weeks of the season and the last 2 weeks of the season and compare it to the happy feet he had in the pocket. It seemed like his internal clock was accelerating and ticking a lot faster when Lane Johnson wasn't on the field. You put Lane there, you keep Jason Peters at the left side, and it's going to really impact the development of Carson Wentz, which is not only the biggest storyline of this entire season, Elliot, but it's something that has been one of the biggest storylines of this training camp.
And that's the thing with Wentz is with Lane on the field, at least before the suspension, he only had 1 interception in 4 games. And then, like you said, his internal clock speeds up. I thought the issue with Wentz last year with his turnovers wasn't so much accuracy. I thought it was decision-making. There were a few that did sail on him, but the majority of those 14, I think, were just bad decisions. Not seeing guys, rushing it, that type of thing. He had 2 or 3 of them where he had to roll out because of pressure and then he threw it. So in an ideal world, I mean, you mentioned it, you have 5 guys back. I do think Sayamalu's a question more than you do, but at the end of the day, you still have 4 of your 5 guys back, and the 5th guy did play last year. So you have a ton of familiarity there. If the offensive line, Pro Football Focus has said they're one of the best offensive lines. I'm not sure if I think they are one of the top 10, and I think they can play well enough to protect Wentz. But you're right. I mean, if Lane plays, the offensive line plays well, that's really when you'll be able to see the improvement Wentz has made. The receivers are going to help, but if he's back there running for his life, not even, the amazing Alshon, the number 1 receiver, most dominant in the NFL, is going to be able to help him.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah, I was being sarcastic for everybody out there that gets on me about the Alshon
Yeah,
stuff.
I think Alshon's about, and not to dive into that
let's knock
rabbit
it
hole
back
again. I
into
think he's a
Alshon,
top
yeah.
15 receiver, but
Right.
we'll see how it plays out this year. But, just getting back to the strengths of this team, championship-winning teams are built in 4 places: quarterback, secondary, offensive line, defensive line. You can kind of move the pieces around. Wide receivers don't typically win championships. Running backs certainly don't win championships in today's NFL. And linebackers are complementary pieces. And if we're projecting out what the Eagles are going to be, not just this season, but 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road, I think we have to give them a lot of credit for what they've been able to build on the defensive line and along the offensive line, providing Lane keeps himself clean and providing they eventually find a replacement for him at right tackle when he moves to left to take the place of Jason Peters.
Yeah, and for everything I've criticized with Howie, that is one thing he knows. I mean, the Eagles have spent the most money on their offense and defensive line, and then quarterback, they've used obviously a ton of assets. Right now they're not paying a ton in cap space, but that's just because he's on his rookie deal. So, all right, we're going to wrap this up. Great interview with Lane. Really happy you got that done and got him. As Matt said at the beginning, you can get us everywhere. I'm not going to do it in that radio voice Matt did, but we got iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and Spreaker. We read your reviews all the time. We really appreciate them. We're up to 4 stars now, slowly making that climb. So we're trying to get to 5 stars. Keep giving us those 5-star reviews.
Some good ones lately.
Yep, and we'll keep getting guys on. So, we had Lane. Well, we'll probably have a guy next week. So thanks, everyone that's been listening. And Matt, thanks for getting Lane.
Always fun.
Talk to you guys soon.